Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. James Daly.
Thank you very much, Chair. And can I apologise to the panel for my lateness? I do apologise. And can I thank you for the work that you've done in respect of this area? It's clearly extremely important. Now, I'm the MP for Bury North in Greater Manchester. I also have a background in criminal law. And so it's a much nuanced area, and we could... I think that talking in the generality probably doesn't do as much good in respect to this. So I'm going to ask some questions regarding the failures and what you found in policing and council institutions in addressing grooming gangs, which is a problem. The next door constituency to me is Rochdale, and we've seen other examples. Maggie Oliver, I've met Maggie and had many conversations with her and other whistleblowers within Greater Manchester Police. And the situation, I mean, I don't know whether you can actually comment regarding Greater Manchester Police, was absolutely abysmal. There was no level of protection for children in these circumstances. So can I ask, just in general, what your findings are regarding, or any recommendations to the police and councils as to how they should approach? I mean, I've seen the mandatory reporting and things, and that's to be welcomed. But I fear that the activity of grooming gangs is happening as we speak. As we speak, it is happening now and not being investigated by the police. And children in my area are being let down. So I just wondered what you feel about that and what the recommendations are directly to the police and the local authorities.
Well, I could repeat some of what I said earlier in respect specifically of networks, organised networks as we choose to call it, and Ms Sharpling could comment on the issues around the police as reflected in our recommendations. I'm sorry to repeat this, but for the sake of being here, what we chose quite purposely not to look at the areas that have been the subject of serious and extensive review already, such, of course, as Rotherham, South Oxford, etc., because this had already had the kind of in-depth review that very many other areas hadn't, but we were anxious to know where else to look at different areas and see what we could find out about how they were addressing the issue you've raised. Yeah. And so we looked at 6 areas in particular across carefully selected.
St Helens, I think.
St Helens, I was just going to say that. I assume that that's the closest one to where you are. But anyhow, what that revealed, well, there were two really important issues. One was about the absolute lack of proper data about any of this, so you couldn't distinguish one, in quotes, grooming gang from another, because the detail of both victims and perpetrators was not recorded by the police and generally not recorded by the council. So ethnicity was not recorded, for example, but nor was any other information. Now it matters, of course, in policing, as Ms Sharpling would say, but it certainly matters to council as well, because there are many circumstances in where the ethnicity of the child, had it been properly recorded, could have provided a better and more effective support service had it been known. We weren't clear exactly why, in the conduct of this study, why there were these omissions, because none of the areas did it, of the 6. And there was concern in the responses we got that perhaps police were not clear about how to ask the questions about ethnicity.
I couldn't ask a question about ethnicity. I mean, they should be sacked, shouldn't they? I mean, that's the most basic level of competence that you can have in the protection of children.
I simply reflect an answer given in the course of the case studies that we carried out in these 6 areas. So that huge issue about data collection, and we made other recommendations about the inadequacies of the current data collection systems, but that's one set of issues. The other one is that in recent times, we believe that child sexual exploitation by organised networks has reduced in its the priority given to it by the agencies charged with addressing these matters and supporting victims. Partly because, not necessarily for any ill-intentioned purpose, but the model of child criminal exploitation has been adopted in most of the areas, which involves bringing together of county lines, modern slavery, and a range of other things alongside issues around CSE. Now, in the model currently being implemented, that has, our assessment was that has led to a depletion of the focus on child sexual exploitation by organised networks, because county lines and other issues have become more important. This is not to say they're not important, they are, but we firmly believe that there should continue to be a distinctive focus on the issues of child sexual exploitation in every area, because it has led people to, I mean, this is a quote, "We don't want to be seen as another Rotherham or Rochdale."
Mr. Jay, can I just, in respect to that, we should be startled, therefore, by what you've just said. Because if there's a lack of focus in police forces on this very most serious of offending, then essentially we are, well, I'm quite speechless that the police are taking that attitude in respect to this. What's your recommendation to us in terms of what we should be doing to ensure that the police take this as one of their absolute main priorities in protecting the most vulnerable?
Well, it is one of their main priorities, as far as I'm aware, policing priorities. But Ms. Sharpling could maybe comment further on that.
Well, obviously, leadership really matters in these circumstances, because of the things that emerged through all our investigations in various degrees was the failure of the police on occasions to consider children worthy of belief, and therefore not taking any action. And you're having a cultural attitude towards children which was unhelpful. And on some occasions, these failures could lead to failures of joining the links, joining the dots, and finding out, whether there was, for example, a paedophile ring or something of that nature. Now there's nothing in the rule book that says that they should do that. The rule book, no doubt, says entirely the opposite.
Yeah.
So it is a matter of management and leadership that must be exercised in order to bring about a change of attitude and the change of behaviour, which is why mandatory reporting, of course, we come back to that, applies to police officers, and why we specifically made a recommendation in our interim report about the senior leaders in the police having, before they become senior leaders, should have some experience of child protection to really understand its implications. After all, to become a chief constable, you have to start more or less as a police constable. And
absolutely, I think you make an incredibly important point, because I think it doesn't just relate to the point that we're talking here. One of the reasons why we've got ridiculously, appallingly low charge-out rates for offences like rape is because of the police attitude to complainants, to vulnerable people who come to them and are just simply disbelieved or treated with essentially contempt. And I suppose my final point, because I don't want to hog too many questions, is that in terms of that fundamental question regarding management, regarding the, in a sort of basic term, how we get the police and the authorities to take this seriously, to change their attitude. Apart from the report, the problem, mandatory reporting is good, but that doesn't change an attitude. That's just something you have to do. What is it that's going to make these people take it seriously, and so we can protect more people?
I think the change in the law has an effect on the behaviour in a way that publishing guidance doesn't necessarily do so. Just for the sake of balance, I ought to say as well that in consulting our forum members, they thought in many cases the police had also got better in relation to child sexual abuse. But I have to say that in the investigations that we looked at, there were many examples of poor practice and poor behaviour.
I don't think we should congratulate anybody on getting better from an appalling situation. If the police were doing the job properly and getting better,
I'm merely repeating what we were told.
Thank you. That's extremely helpful. Thank you very much.
I should add, simply just on the matter of CSE, that going back to my previous work in this area as well, there was a general view that children, particularly children in care, were not worthy of protection, especially if they were girls. And they were seen as being responsible for their own abuse.
And I suspect that attitude hasn't changed, Professor Jay. Thank you, Chair.
That's truly shocking, isn't it, to hear you say that? I think we're going to explore mandatory reporting a little more. Tim Law.